Right, welcome to the last afternoon of the conference. Ooh. Enjoyed yourselves?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
very much.
Right, good. Like I said before, if you've got any complaints, go and see Don. If there's anything good, I'm more than happy to hear it.
Oh yeah, of course.
This afternoon, I'd like to talk about creating some commandlets for working with the registry. Now, you've got a choice. You can either have a bunch of PowerPoints or you can have a bunch of code. What do you want?
Oh.
Code? Right, okay. Working with the registry, you've got a bunch of options. There's a provider, there's WMI, and there's .NET. This is all going to be around the WMI. What we're going to do is take the std-reg-prov WMI class. We're going to wrap it in some XML. Don't start panicking yet, it's not that difficult. And we're going to publish it as a PowerShell module. And this is the way that a lot of the commandlets that are already in Windows are produced. So practically all, if not all, of the networking commandlets that I was showing the other day are produced that way. The DNS server commandlets are produced that way. And I think it's about 2/3, isn't it, of the Windows commandlets are actually produced that way. So if you hunt through the PowerShell modules folders, anything that you find with a .cdXML is produced in this way. So I am going to stop with that at that point, and we'll switch. So std-reg-prov. How many people have used this already? Yeah, like it?
No.
No, pain in the backside.
Yeah.
It's a class. There's a version of it in root cmv2. Pre-Vista, it's in root default. It's still there. It's about the only thing that is in root default, that and a few eventing classes. No properties on it, it's methods only. And if you've worked with the registry, you should recognize things like D-words and strings and multi-strings and expanded strings. And if we look in a little bit more depth at one of them, they're static methods, which means we don't need an actual instance of a class. Which means we can play with it quite nicely. And they've got a bunch of parameters. hdef key defines the part of the registry we're going to be working with, subkey name, and value as described. hdef key is lovely because you have to use one of the delightful things. Now, please take notice of this. There will be a test before coffee, and if you don't pass, you don't get any coffee. They are, yeah, that's one of the joys of it. And that is one of the things that we'll be getting round. Would you prefer to use that? Or would you just prefer to put in HKLM? Yeah? That's what we'll be doing. So we'll create a reference. This is going to be to HKLM. We'll create a reference to a subkey and a value. And we'll just have a little bit of a trip back in history. A long, long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Well, actually, just down the road. The WMI class accelerator came crawling out of the code, and that's what we used to use with version 1.
Right.
And then you can call the class, and you can get the result, and it comes through in this S value. This is the thing with this class. You get a something value returned, and it's S or U or whatever, depending on the type that you're getting back, and you can pick out your result from that. And as we said the other day, I can't remember whose talk it was, with WMI, if you get a return code of 0, you're good. Anything else, it's time to start panicking. And we'll just have a look at that. It's just standard WMI stuff coming back. I'll make all of this available and you can go to the arts content. The key I'm using here is a standard Windows one, so it's not going to be difficult. And then you can pick up the value out as you normally do. Or you can do it the other way and do it like that. Right. Question number 1, before you're allowed to skip. Month and year that PowerShell 1 was released.
May 2000.
Pardon?
May 06?
No. Oh, come on, I don't want to take these back on the plane. Somebody's got to get it.
Version 1.
Version 1.
Oh, was that not early 2008?
2008? No. You're 2 years out. It was announced. Pardon? Wrong way. November 2006.
I was just
This gentleman made the announcement at TechEd in Barcelona. Now sat in the audience going, "Hooray!"
All praise the Lord about that.
And that was, it does seem like a long time ago, and think how far we've come since then. Then we got PowerShell 2 with invoke WI method. That made life a little bit easier. So you give it the class, you give it the method name you want to use, you give it the argument list. This is just picking off the variables that we've already got. But there is a slight problem with it using it, which I'll just demonstrate as we go through. So we'll start with creating a new key. That works fine. We'll create a value, and that works fine. And we'll look to change it. So we'll change it to April this year. It says return value 0, so that's good. The problem is that with using invoke WI method, you can't use the order of the parameters that it gives you in the documentation. You have to put them in alphabetical order. Yeah, the order yeah.
You didn't know that?
It's a .NET thing, I think. It's the only thing that I have to trace it down to. Because if you compare the documentation and what comes out of getSim class, the order is different. And it's believe getSim class, forget the documentation. Use the order that getSim class tells you. PowerShell is always right. So it's just a little thing to be aware of. And it's this value and value name that trips up. Because in the documentation, it gives them the other way around, so it gives you value name first rather than value. And that's why it went wrong. So we retry it using the correct thing, get the results, and if we actually look at it, it's worked. And then we got PowerShell 3 with invoke CIM method. That took the problem away because you have to give the argument, the name and the value. So you can't get it wrong, it can't get it wrong, everybody's happy, and it works. These aren't the commandlets that you want, are they? What you want to do is have a nice module that gives you a whole bunch of things working off the methods. Now, I deliberately used Registry and then the type just to make it nice and obvious while we're talking. The name is totally controllable because it's all in the CDMX file. The code will be made available. I will try and get it to done today. If not, it'll be a couple of weeks before it's available because I've got other commitments next week. But it will be available. And if I forget, somebody email me and I will make sure that it is available. And you can play with this to your heart's content. And then you can just do something like that and you can get the value. And so you're taking away that horrible number, you're just giving it the information you want, but you're giving it in a way that fits in with the rest of PowerShell and it is nice and easy to use. Happy? You like that?
Yeah.
Right. And you can do it the other way and you can set. And again, I've left the return code in. That is totally controllable. You can take that away if you want. I'll show you which parts of the code you need to drop if you want that to be taken out. So you can set. But basically for each of the major methods, you get a commandlet. Yes?
You just lit my eyes. But because it's all based on CIM class, that means remoted to other computers is built in, isn't it? I can access a computer's registry by, say, computer date and change it that way now?
Okay. Yes.
Yes! Yes!
Yes. I was leading up to that, but as the questions came up, you know, with advanced functions, as soon as you put that commandlet binding bit in, you get verbose, and you get debug, and you get all of the other goodness. With this, as soon as you wrap it up in a CDXML file, you get as job, and you get sim session. So you've now got a registry commandlet that you can work locally or you can work remotely, and it's as long as you can get a sim session connection, which needs WSMAN up and running on the VAR-box, you're good to go. I'll just get rid of the stuff we've been playing with. Right. I suppose you want to know how to do this, don't you? Yeah?
By hand.
Okay. As I'm in a good mood, but make the most of it because it doesn't last. Right. I'm just going to show you a very, very simple example first using the win32_bias class because it's a nice simple class. It just does a get and it's a nice lead into this. So one commandlet in it, get BIOS, gives you the standard stuff back, and we'll just compare it with get sim instance. They are the same because it uses the normal default formatting. Because it's just returning sim, it's all picked up by the formatting. So again, all of that work is done for you. It's a nice way of doing things. And you get, if you want to dig into it as normal, you can display the whole bunch of stuff. And if you look at the bottom, it actually tells you the sim class you're using, which you know because you wrote the module. But my biggest takeaway from this is ease of use. Rather than having to explain to your junior admins how to use the sim commandlets, how to work with WMI, you create this, you give it to them, it fits the model. They can get up and running with this straight off. And as Sean said, you get the sim session and the as job. And I'm just going against this local machine, but it works. Yeah. And to see how that looks, we will look at that. And that's it. That's all you need. So all of that I showed you with BIOS is for this. So you've got first couple of lines are header stuff. The important bit is this commandlet over objects. This is what it's all based on. You then define the class or the namespace in the class, standard WMI stuff. You give it a version number, that's up to you. You define a default noun, that's up to you. For a simple get, that is enough. So of that, there is 2 lines that you need to change for any other WMI class that you want to do a get on. So you change the class
Default now.
and you change the default noun. So you any WMI, any of the standard WMI classes, the disk classes, operating system, computer system, anything that you want, you can just plug into that model. And you've then got a commandlet that you can give your junior admins. Yeah. It's 1 file per class, so you can't put multiple WMI classes into one of these, but you can have multiple CDXML files. You can use a PSN1 file to load them all for you. And if you look in, as I said, if you look through the subfolders in the modules folder in the PowerShell install directory, you'll see how they do all that. It's dead easy. Happy with that? Nice and easy? Especially for the last afternoon, it's not flying. Right, so you've seen the code. Right. That is the standard to get you a get whatever. You then need to do a little bit more WMI for each of the methods. So a little bit more XML for each of the methods. It's no more complicated than that. If you break it down, take it a step at a time, it's all nice and easy. I did a session 2 years ago at the Deep Dive in San Diego, explaining how to do this with the logical disk class, I think it was. I'll put that code in there as well, so you've got that to play with. Right, so we'll now move to actually working with the registry class, and I'll show you how to get the methods working. It does get a little bit more chewy, but nothing major. Right, so, no, we won't. Yeah, that one, that's fine. So while I'm just running through this part of the demo, I'm just going to work with the getString method. I've got a version that's got all of them in. That will be in the code. But just to keep the example simple, I'm just working with a single method. And to be honest, that's a good way of developing it, because you can get one bit working, you know it works, cut and paste, make the changes, yay, quick. So, remember I mentioned the header stuff to begin with? So, you've got a version number, I've got 1.0, this one rather than 1.0. I've set registry as the default noun, and I've got my header stuff. This line defines that you're using static methods, and then that, excuse me, you have a commandlet tag pair for each of the methods that you're working with. You define the method name, you give it the verb and the noun that you want to use. Again, it's under all your control. As I said, I made it registry whatever, so that it's nice and obvious. If you take this and modify it, feel free to change it to whatever you're comfortable with. You define the return value, and the only important bit here is the commandlet output metadata. That tells it that it's coming out rather than going in. And you give it the type. Be careful with integers, because WMI uses unsigned integers rather than the normal int32. Just remember that. And then you get the parameters. And I'll just show you one of these because they're all the same. So you can see here, you've got a parameters block, and then for each parameter, standard XML, you give it the PS name, which is what appears on the commandlet. You give it the parameter name, which is what WMI wants to work with. So you don't have to stick with the WMI parameter names. You can create your own. You tell it the type, and that's it. And you just wash, rinse, lather, and repeat. So as many as you need. Just make sure that you get the type right, otherwise it does go a little bananas if you don't. But standard debugging. And that's all there is to it.
So have you written a function to interrogate a class and just write the CDXML for you?
It's on my to-do list. There was it Sim Studio, or it was something like that it was called, wasn't it? There's a plugin for Visual Studio which did an awful lot of this for you. I don't think that ever reached completion, was it? It was left.
I think it did, and then it broke and then it
Yeah. But to be honest, I've found that cut and paste is so fast for doing this that it just works. It doesn't take that long to do. And if you build it up a step at a time, rather than trying to do everything in one big hit, it's very logical. There is, on the slide deck, there's a reference to a white paper that describes all of the CDXML and gives you the schema and a whole bunch of other examples as well. I'd recommend downloading that and reading it if you're going to get into this. It's a very good, very, very good document. It's where I stole a lot of my ideas from. So, we've done that. And then we can use it. So we'll define the variables again. Skip through that quickly. Import module. And again, because you've got PowerShell doing all the heavy work for you, it's just import module. The only reason that I'm actually defining the file because I've got them all in this folder rather than on my module path. Treat it like a standard module. You create a subfolder on your module path. You have the CDXML file in that. It will auto-load, and all of the standard PowerShell module goodness comes to you. So the single commandlet that we expected, we covered that. And then to use it, bingo. Couldn't be easier. So let's get rid of that. But we don't want to use that horrible big number because I can never remember it. I suspect that there's nobody else that does. So what I want is to be able to put HKLM or whatever else it is and just it worked for me. So how do we do that? Quite simply. Right, so 2. Next time I will get everything to line up in terms of numbering. So this top bit is very, very similar. The change is here. Remember that it was a system,
UN, right?
it was an unsigned integer, and I've changed the type. And if you go looking for that type on MSDN or anywhere, you won't find it because it's defined further down in the code. And what you're creating is an enumeration. So you're giving it something friendly and the value. You give it a type. You use that type in your parameter definition. And it works. It just works. And that's all you need to do to define the enumeration. So you give it the name, which is what you saw earlier up. You give it the underlying type, and then you just define a set of pairs. The name and the value. It doesn't get any simpler.
Are there any built-in .NET enums that you can actually use for the registry?
No, because WMI doesn't know anything about
Okay.
.NET and doesn't care. WMI lives in its own world.
I was just thinking from this perspective of actually like being able to, you know, if you're saying system.un32, like you're referencing the .NET types. If you could just say, hey, the expected value is one of these. I was just curious if that was like one less.
No,
Okay.
don't think it works that way.
Cool.
I'll admit that I've not tried it, but everything that I've read leads me to believe it won't. So we've created a enum. We've told the parameter to use it. So let's see how that works. So we'll make sure that we've loaded it properly. We'll keep defining our values because unfortunately we can't define the subkeys of values that we want to use. Unless you've got, actually, yeah, you could even do that. If you've got specific things that you really, really want to hit often, you could even define those. So, the hive now becomes HKLN. It's just a simple string rather than that horrible big number. And it just keeps working. You get automatic validation. So if you like me and you can't spell, and as you know I can't speak English either according to Jason, so I don't stand a chance at all. You get the standard does not compute, and it gives you the values that you should be using. Standard PowerShell. This is the behavior that you expect. This is behavior that you get, and it just works. Brilliant. Defaults to HKLM because of the values, and that's all you have to do to make that bit so much simpler. Yes, sir.
On the enums, could you also put in the long names for each of their files and have both in there?
You could. You have to. Actually, that reminds me of something. You have to be very careful with the enums. The names, you're not allowed to have spaces in. It will break if you put a space in. So if it's something that you want a space in, put underscores or concatenate it or do something with it to get rid of the spaces, because it will go not plain if you've got a space in there. But yes, it's basically free-form text. You can put what you want in there. You can call them Fred and Joe and Bill if you want. It's entirely up to you.
You could try it. I mean, could you put both in there, resulting in the same integer?
Yeah, you'd have.
You have to specify
I
one
don't
type.
think you can define two types.
Yeah.
But it's just one type of two values. Open up the file, let's try it.
Chicken. Can we do that when I'm finished?
Good answer, good answer.
Profiles occur.
Yeah. Right. We'll have a look at that when I'm finished. Because if I lose my track, I'll be lost. It's too late at night for me to think about things like that. It's nearly bedtime. Right. So we've seen that we can change the values that we're actually inputting, and we can actually start to get some validation around it because we're using that enum. We can take it a step further. We can make the hive parameter mandatory, exactly the same way that you can with an advanced function. You know all of the validation stuff that you can do in advanced functions? Most, if not all of that, you can also do with these. The syntax is obviously quite different because you're dealing, slightly different because you're dealing with XML, but you can do exactly the same. And I'll show you. If I remember what I'm doing, I will show you how that works. Right, and all you have to do, actually, I'll just carry it down. That line Just needs adding.
Very
Now, does that look familiar? Mandatory equals true. That's very, very similar. The syntax is very, very close, and the actual stuff you put in. And when you look at it, it's just there. And that's the great thing about this. Like you're developing an advanced function. You start with the basics, and you add bits in, and you add bits in, and you add bits in. You test it incrementally. You can do exactly the same with this. You can start with the bare bones, as you saw with the bias example, or with the first example here, and you can add bits in, and add bits in, and add bits in. So this becomes mandatory, and it behaves, guess what? It behaves exactly like you would expect. We've done that. I meant to take that out. Alright, so we've seen it working like that. That's because we've got boys and girls and we've used it properly. It's late at night and we're typing quickly and we forget it. And it prompts exactly as you would expect. And I know I keep saying that phrase, but this is the beauty of this. It behaves exactly as you would expect. It just becomes another command line. Still expects a value. So you now have got a simple to use commandlet that's made it easier to use because you've taken away that horrible number and you've started to put validation around the parameters. But that's only the hive. What about the rest of it? What can we do with that? Let's have a look. Validate not null or empty. Does that ring any bells? What do you want to validate today? And again, it's all. That's all you need. It's exactly the same as with an advanced function. You just slap the validation on. Job's good. This is the coolest. I told you before, this is the coolest thing you've ever done, and I really, really love this. It is so elegant. So that's using it properly. If we forget, I love the and try again. Yeah. Valid parameter, all of the error messages that you're going to expect. And if you forget, because we put the validation on, it forces correctness. Now you compare using something like this with telling your junior admin to use std-regprof and invoke CIM method and get some stuff out of the registry for you, and then go and do it against those 100 servers over there. And if it's going to give you the standard errors if you don't give it the value at all, because it's not what it wants to do. So you still get the standard WMI errors coming through underneath if all else fails. There's a couple of other interesting things when you're dealing with the registry. So let's have a quick look at those. demo, I will show you. I'm going to be working with the whole thing. With all, I'm not going to go through all of the methods. There is a text file in here with tests against all of them, and including creating keys and doing all of that goodness. So you can work through that yourself. I think it's about 160 lines or something. So it would take a while to work through if we just sat and did everything, and it would get boring. Right. So let's have a look at the final beastie. And it comes to 652 lines, but it's all cut and paste because it's all. This one's nice because it's all similar. So what have we got that we changed? Okay, so I've added the key and value management. Okay, where you're enumerating the values, you get a little bit of fun there because you get two separate lots of output. So you get you get the name and you get the type. So you need to output two. The type comes out as, like an awful lot of WMI, it comes out as a number. So who can tell me what registry type 11 is? I can't remember either. But you can create another enum with the type, and it'll put it out as a friendly version that you can use. Remember with the PowerShell and WMI, a lot of the if you've read that, a lot of the functions in there, I gave you a hash table to decode all of the numeric values that you get in return. You can do it in this, but just create another enum. You reference the type, you tell it it's an array that's coming out, it works. One of the other little oddities is when you're working with the binary values, where are they? Here we are. Yeah. Excuse me. WMI has an integer 8, and .NET doesn't like that, so you just use a byte. It works quite nicely. That's the only change you need to make that work. The set methods, again, they're just more of the same, adding the parameters in. If you're creating these, I would recommend that you actually create them in chunks and you put lots of comments in so that you can find stuff again when you're hunting through it, because these do get quite verbose. And I think the only other thing I wanted to show you was the uintate. Yeah, that's the bit at the bottom there is the enum for the value types. So string comes back as 1, 11 comes back as a keyword, which is the 64-bit integer. And that is your registry module. And all of those commandlets come into that. So you get one commandlet per method in just good time. So we import that. Standard module, you see all your commandlets. I'll just whip through some of these. And you can, this is what you're actually working with. It creates this PowerShell function. Yeah. I think I'll stick with the XML. It's a lot quicker to write. So it's taking the XML and the commandlet server objects engine is creating a function for you. And because it's a module, you get it goes away when you're finished with it. Let's have a look at some examples. So to look at the keys that you've got, just hitting this, the standard software subkey because I know it's there and it's simple to work with. You can get the values. Don't go hunting for a module test. That's something that I just made up for this. But you can see that you're getting the name of the, at this side, you're getting the name, and then you're getting the type come through rather than just the numeric value. Unfortunately, I haven't thought of a way to actually tie those up within the module. So the only thing that I could think of was doing something ugly like this. I suspect there's a better way, but I haven't thought of it yet. But even that's better than trying to decode the numeric ones. And you're just telling it what you want. You can change stuff. And it works, honest gov. You can work with multiple strings. You can change the arrays. Again, that multi-string, it just comes back as a string array. So you can standard PowerShell array manipulation. You can work with, now the binary ones have always been a pain to work with. This starts to get, assuming that you actually know what it means. So I don't recommend that you just dive in and start changing the binary ones. It tends to be what's known as a bad idea. But if you do need to work with them, you've now got a nice, simple way to do it. Just expand it out just to make sure it's there. And that is how you cmdlet-ize the registry. Thank you.
Cool.
As I said, I'll make all the code available. Please play with it. Please break it. If you've got any suggestions or questions, give me an email and I will, I'm not sure about happily, but I will respond.
If we're going to break it, let's break it now. Let's try that test.
Well, was changing this, wasn't it? Let's go to, where did we bring that one in? Let's break this one. So you want, what did you want to do? Oh, give it.
So we're going to separate all, like the word HP local, HP underscore local machine and HPLM. Yeah,
Okay.
Just duplicate it, call it thread.
So, so you want to change this to
HP local machine.
HKey underscore local underscore machine.
it's too much typing.
Oh.
This is why I never type in demos, because I can't type.
You just rerun the demo script.
No. Because that will, there was a whole bunch of stuff that we were doing in type 1. Okay, so that worked. And so get fine.
Hey, Jeffrey, while we're waiting, this would be kind of a nice module to add in PowerShell.
Actually, I was thinking, if you recall the original WMIC, that had like 70 of these things. I did all that during my Christmas vacation. It's like I should do it again. There's a whole bunch of stuff there that doesn't have a PowerShell book. It's just fine, this is boring.
Oh, really?
Hey Jeffrey, since you wrote WMIC,
Oh, I see.
I was never able to figure out
Well, you can hit
a
escape
way to
instead of
embed
clicking
an
instead of
instance of an object
clicking when it's selected. You have to hit
into another
that way. If you
WMI
have
object.
it and it's like selected, then you
Yeah. So yeah, it can't be done. Yeah.
All sorts of problems. Originally, the way PowerShell started was taking WMIC, and it turns out WMIC actually you can cascade XSLT transforms.
Right.
And so I was actually going to just turn PowerShell. I was going to have WMIC written in .NET, and then have pipelines of XSLT transforms. If you've ever played with XSLT, you know exactly what a bad idea that was.
It's ugly.
Just a disaster. And I kept thinking that I just had to like get through the knot hole and figure it out. That was not the case.
Right, so that's what we had, and we just changed it to, it was local machine, wasn't it? We changed it to. Something on
I think you modified registry 1, not registry 2.
Did I?
I think so.
That could explain what.
Is registry 1 or 2 selected? I can't tell.
No, it's 2.
Oh, I guess it's 2.
Did you restart PowerShell? Because I think what might happen is because .NET type is generated dynamically,
Yes.
you have to restart it to generate a new type.
That's interesting. Huh.
Make sure I done properly. I'll move outside and we'll finish this off, and I'll let you know the next speaker is going to be in. But it looks, the module loaded, so I'd expect it to work. Normally it will throw an error